The morning sun had just begun to crawl across the low rooftops of Greenvale, a quiet working-class neighborhood tucked away in the outskirts of Los Angeles. It was the kind of place where the coffee shops still knew your name, and the sidewalks bore the familiar rhythm of daily life. Mothers walking kids to school, retired men tending their hedges, and the occasional jogger moving through like clockwork. But today, something felt different. Beneath the surface calm there was an undercurrent of something sharp, something waiting. Keanu Reeves stepped out of his black Dodge Ram with a quiet ease, holding a canvas leash in one hand. At the other end of that leash was a pit bull named Shadow, a rescue dog with a glossy gray coat and eyes that had seen too much. Keanu didn't just adopt him. He earned his trust one long walk at a time. Shadow wasn't just a pet. He was his companion, his balance, especially now, as filming wrapped up on a gritty indie project in downtown LA. The shoot had ended early that day. Some equipment failure. Most of the crew took it as a gift. Time to relax, grab food, maybe unwind. But Keanu wasn't interested in idle talk or the hollow glamour of another industry lunch. He just wanted time alone with Shadow, the kind of quiet that wasn't for show. So he found a park just a few blocks from set, Mulberry Ridge, a place he'd only seen from the car. The name sounded peaceful. He hoped it lived up to it. They walked through the park gates, the leash slack, Shadow walking in perfect rhythm with him. They weren't in a rush. Keanu carried a small bottle of water and a collapsible bowl in his jacket pocket, always prepared. There was a stillness in his expression, the kind that came not from detachment, but presence. He noticed the way the morning light filtered through the trees, how Shadow paused by each tree stump as if checking in on the old stories hidden in the bark. They reached a bench tucked under the shade of an elm tree. Keanu sat. Shadow laid at his feet. The dog's breathing was even, ears flicking gently with the breeze. Keanu reached into his pocket, poured some water into the bowl, and placed it in front of Shadow, who drank without hesitation. But then the peace fractured. The loud, ragged roar of motorcycle engines broke the calm as a gang of 6 rolled into the park's side lot. Their bikes, matte black with chrome tips, screamed rebellion, but not the romantic kind. Their leader was a broad-shouldered man with a busted nose and a greasy braid that hung down his back. His vest bore a crude patch stitched with the image of a wolf's skull and the words, "Blood Dogs MC." The rest of the crew followed his lead. Thick boots, sharp eyes, loose tempers. Keanu glanced up briefly, watching the group from behind his sunglasses. Shadow lifted his head, sniffed the air, but remained calm. The bikers parked their motorcycles without grace, tires skidding, engines cutting off with violent echoes. They strutted in like they owned the place, cutting through the open field without regard for the few locals still present. And then one of them noticed Shadow. It started with a smirk, then a comment too far to hear, then laughter. One of the bikers, a lanky man with missing teeth and hands covered in crude tattoos, peeled off from the group and headed toward Keanu and Shadow. He wore a vest like the others, but his had additional embellishments, rusted chains along the seams and a silver skull dangling from his belt. He stopped a few feet away, sneering at the sight of the dog lounging peacefully. "Well, what do we got here?" he muttered loud enough for Keanu to hear. "A movie star and his little mutt?" Keanu didn't respond. Not immediately. He calmly reached down, placing his hand on Shadow's shoulder. The dog stilled, but his eyes remained on the man, ears slightly back. "You don't look like you belong here." The biker continued, stepping closer, emboldened by Keanu's silence. "This ain't a photo op, pal. Maybe your dog should learn some manners." Keanu finally spoke. His voice was quiet but firm. "We're just here for a walk. Let it be." But the biker wasn't here for peace. He spat on the ground and chuckled darkly. "That mutt's got eyes like he's better than me." Then, without warning, he raised his boot and kicked. It wasn't a tap. It was a deliberate, malicious strike to the dog's side. Shadow yelped, recoiling, stumbling into Keanu's leg. The air snapped. The park around them blurred into background static. Keanu stood, slowly, deliberately. The leash dropped from his hand. Shadow pressed against his leg, shaking but not barking. The biker took a step back, but the smirk hadn't faded yet. "What, you gonna cry about it, movie man?" Keanu didn't answer. He stepped forward, his face unreadable behind his sunglasses, his movements silent as winter. He didn't need to raise his voice. His presence shifted the air around them. "You think that was funny?" Keanu asked, his voice low and calm like a wire pulled too tight. That was a living being, my friend, the biker scoffed. He's a dog, man. Don't get your feelings hurt. Keanu took another step. Now, they were face to face. He didn't shout. He didn't threaten. He didn't need to. Leave this park, Keanu said. Take your gang. Don't come back. The biker laughed and turned to call for backup. But when he glanced at the rest of the Blood Dogs MC, they hadn't followed. They stood at the edge of the field, watching the interaction but making no move to support him. One even shook his head, muttering something to the others. The silence weighed down. Keanu never moved again. He simply stood there, still, steady, unflinching. And something in that broke the biker. He spit again, cursed under his breath and stormed off, throwing a kick at a nearby trash can as he retreated. Keanu knelt by Shadow, checking him gently. No broken bones, but the dog winced slightly as he was touched near the ribs. Still, his tail gave a small, loyal wag. Keanu poured more water. Shadow drank. Across the field, the Blood Dogs started their engines again. Keanu stayed where he was, unmoving, until they were gone. But something lingered in the air. A warning. A tension unresolved. The kind of silence that didn't mean safety. Because when men like that feel embarrassed, they rarely walk away for good. And Keanu knew that. He placed his hand on Shadow's head and whispered, "We'll be ready next time." He didn't know yet what form that next time would take, but it was coming. And this time it would be more than just a walk in the park. The late afternoon sun dipped lower over Greenvale, casting long, amber shadows across the cracked sidewalks and chain-link fences. Keanu Reeves walked in silence, Shadow at his side, still slightly limping from the earlier assault. They'd left the park behind, not because they were afraid, but because Keanu knew how retaliation worked. It didn't announce itself. It circled back when you least expected it. And the look in that biker's eyes? That wasn't over. Back at his temporary rental, a modest one-story house with ivy climbing up the side, Keanu knelt beside Shadow on the porch, gently running his hands along the dog's ribs. Shadow winced but didn't pull away. His loyalty never faltered. "We'll have Dr. Holman look at you tomorrow," Keanu said softly, just to be sure. Inside, he poured Shadow a bowl of premium kibble laced with boiled chicken and set it down on the kitchen floor. The dog sniffed it, then looked up at Keanu, still off, still shaken. Keanu sat cross-legged on the floor beside him. No words, just presence. He didn't check his phone, didn't turn on the TV. The walls could wait. Shadow needed his silence more than any distraction. But outside, far from that sanctuary of quiet, trouble was moving. At a grimy auto shop known as Torque's Den, the Blood Dogs MC gathered under flickering fluorescent lights and the hum of broken vending machines. The man who had kicked Shadow, Briggs, paced in front of the others, his jaw tight, his eyes burning. "You should have seen the way he looked at me," Briggs barked, "like I was some damn insect." The others said nothing. Briggs was known for running hot, too hot. But this time he had a name, a real one. "That was Keanu Reeves, man," one of them said slowly. "You seriously kicked a dog owned by him?" Briggs sneered. "So what? He's just another Hollywood snowflake, probably thinks his mutt's got rights." Another biker shook his head. "He's not like the others. Guy's low-key, stays out of headlines. You picked the wrong target." Briggs, the club's leader, Thorne, a broad-shouldered man with scars that told 100 stories, finally spoke. "You embarrassed the club. In public. You escalated something we didn't ask for." Briggs didn't back down. He humiliated. "Me told me to leave like I was nobody." Thorne's voice dropped to a growl. "You are nobody." Silence. Tension thickened. Thorne took a slow drag from his cigarette and flicked the ash toward Briggs's boots. "You want to settle your ego. Do it smart. Not like a damn toddler with a boot. If this goes sideways, it's on you, not us." Briggs gritted his teeth but nodded, the rage in his eyes growing colder, more calculated. The next morning, Keanu stood outside the local vet clinic, a small building nestled between a laundromat and a corner bodega. Greenvale Animal Care. The sign had a faded paw print and a crooked E inside. Dr. Holman, an older woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, greeted him with a warm nod. "Keanu, Shadow, come on in." Shadow was weighed, examined, and x-rayed. Thankfully, no broken ribs, just bruising and inflammation. He'll be sore for a few days, Dr. Holman explained, but no permanent damage. Keep him off any stairs. And limit rough play. Keanu nodded. Thanks, Doc. As he left the clinic, a black Dodge Charger idled across the street, unmarked. Windows tinted dark. Keanu felt the heat of a stare but didn't react. He knew how to read a tale, and that car wasn't just passing by. The slow roll it took to turn the corner confirmed it. The blood dogs weren't done. Later that day, back at the film set, the director clapped his hands together. All right, team, Keanu's back. Let's knock out the interrogation scenes. Cameras rolled. Lights reset. But something in Keanu had shifted. The pain in Shadow's eyes. The bite of that biker's boot. The threat it carried. It all simmered beneath his calm surface. And it bled into his performance. Every line. Every glance. Every quiet pause between words. The crew noticed. The director leaned over to the script supervisor and whispered, "He's in another gear today." That night, Keanu double-checked the locks. Then he sat at the small dining table and placed an old flip phone on the wood. He hadn't touched that phone in years, but it was charged. Only one number was stored inside. Gabe Moretti, a former military liaison turned private consultant. Keanu dialed. "Gabe," he said when the line clicked. "I think I have a situation. It's about a gang called the Blood Dogs. They kicked my dog yesterday." There was a pause on the other end. Then, "Who'd be stupid enough to do that?" Keanu's voice stayed steady. "One of them did. Then, I was followed today. I'm not looking to start a war, just stay ahead of it. You want surveillance?" Keanu exhaled. "I want to know what I'm up against." Gabe didn't hesitate. "Done. I'll have eyes in Greenvale within 12 hours. Don't go out alone." The next morning, Keanu woke up to a note on his front door. It wasn't taped. It was stabbed, held in place by a rusty switchblade dug halfway into the wood. The note was simple. Sloppy black marker on lined paper. "You embarrassed me. The dog won't be the only one limping next time." No name, but it didn't need one. Keanu pulled the blade free, folded the note, and slid it into his jacket. He looked at Shadow, who stood at the door, ears alert, tail low. "It's all right, boy," he said. "I've got it." But even as he said the words, Keanu knew the game had changed. They weren't trying to scare him anymore. They were preparing for something worse. And if they thought silence would be his response, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Keanu Reeves didn't flinch as he slid the switchblade across the table, letting it spin slowly before it stopped near the center. The note, folded and creased, rested beside his coffee mug. He hadn't touched it again since pulling it from his front door. Shadow sat by the window, his eyes locked on the street as if he too sensed something was coming. The silence inside. The house felt deliberate, not peaceful, measured. Keanu stood still, one hand resting lightly on the back of the chair, his other gently tapping the folded paper. His thoughts weren't racing. They were aiming. At 8:13 a.m. sharp, his phone buzzed. "Gabe." "Moretti," Keanu answered without hesitation. "They're watching you," Gabe said flatly. "One tail on foot. Rotates shifts every 4 hours. We ID'd the car from yesterday. Registered to a burner company in Bakersfield. Blood dogs are getting organized." Keanu didn't speak. "There's more," Gabe continued. "Their clubhouse. Outside Greenvale. It's a front. Not just for bike repairs or gatherings. You were right to suspect something bigger. Trafficking, substances, maybe weapons. You getting that note makes it personal now. You ready to go public with this?" Keanu's voice was calm. "No. Then you'll need leverage," Gabe replied. "Real leverage." "I already have it," Keanu said. He looked down at the note. They crossed a line. Meanwhile, Briggs paced the floor of the Blood Dogs clubhouse like a wolf trapped in a cage. He wasn't satisfied with warnings. He wanted Keanu humiliated, cornered, broken. What he hadn't expected was the silence, no retaliation, no cops. No press, nothing, and that made him nervous. "You sure he's not planning something?" he asked one of his crew. A wiry man named Cody who worked as their unofficial eyes on the street. Cody shrugged. "He's quiet, but he's not scared." Briggs chewed the inside of his cheek. "That dog's still breathing, that's a problem." Thorne, the club's leader, overheard the conversation and approached. "This was supposed to be over," Thorne growled. "We don't need this heat. Not now. You bring the law into this, I'll put you out front as the welcome mat." Briggs scoffed. "He's just an actor. He's not a threat." Thorne's eyes narrowed. "Then why are you still obsessed?" Silence. No answer. Because Thorne was right. Briggs had taken something small, a kick, and turned it into a personal vendetta. And now that vendetta was slipping through his fingers, Keanu didn't go to set that day. Instead, he drove to a quiet property just outside Greenvale, a red barn-turned-training facility, known by few and visited by fewer. The only sign was a small wooden plaque, Windmark. No, Keanu replied. I wired the underside of the window trim 2 nights ago. I had a feeling. He handed over the memory chip. Gabe slotted it into a device. A voice crackled to life. Faint. Gritty. He's in there. Lights are off. I say we torch the place and blame junkies. Gabe's jaw tightened. He embarrassed Briggs. He's got to pay. We can make it look like an accident. That was enough. That's conspiracy and premeditation, Gabe said grimly. You could hand this to LAPD right now. Keanu shook his head. Not yet. Not until we shut them down completely. Gabe hesitated. You're not trained for this anymore. Keanu's gaze didn't move. No one ever forgets. Back in Greenvale, the streets seemed normal. Too normal. The waitress from the first bar confrontation, Mel, walked with her head down. Since the blood dogs had started hanging around again, tips had dropped, fights had increased, and staff turnover became weekly. The fear was back. You could feel it in the way people spoke, in short, clipped sentences, in how they avoided eye contact. But then Keanu walked into the cafe again. This time, without Shadow. Mel looked up, surprised. Didn't think you'd come back after. That, Keanu gave a small nod. I don't walk away from people who need backup. She glanced toward the window. They've been showing up again, watching, asking questions. Keanu sat quietly. You trust me? Mel hesitated, then nodded. More than I trust anyone else around here. He slid a small slip of paper toward her. Call this number when they show up again. Don't confront them. Don't say anything. Just call. Mel looked down. Who is it? Someone who listens, Keanu said simply. That night, under the orange haze of a sodium street lamp, Briggs leaned against the edge of an alley, flipping a coin in his palm. He watched the cafe, chewing on a toothpick like it owed him money. Cody stood nearby, glancing toward the main road. You sure he's not inside? Cody asked. Inside, Gabe waited. The place was a relic from another life. Sandbags, mats, reinforced walls, and audio equipment wired into corners. You're really doing this, Gabe said, stepping forward, eyes scanning the bag Keanu carried. Keanu nodded and opened it. Inside were 3 things: the switchblade, the note, and a small, discreet audio recorder. Gabe raised an eyebrow. You bugged your own porch? Briggs didn't answer. Instead, he flicked the coin hard. It clanged against the metal dumpster and bounced off into the dark. We're not waiting anymore, Briggs said. He moved toward the back entrance of the cafe, his steps quiet. Calculated, but before he could reach the door, a black SUV pulled in fast, tires squealing. 2 men stepped out. Not cops. Not Keanu. But they moved with purpose, and they were not amateurs. Cody backed up instantly. Briggs stood frozen. You've got 5 seconds, one of the men said, his voice low but full of weight. To disappear. You come back, the next stop's not a conversation. Briggs snarled but didn't argue. He wasn't stupid. He turned and walked away. But inside, rage burned hotter than ever. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Back at home, Keanu looked down at Shadow, who lay curled near the foot of the couch, healing but still tired. Soon, Keanu whispered. We end this soon. The room fell silent again. But this time it wasn't tension. It was preparation. Because the next move wouldn't be defense. It would be the beginning of the takedown. The night wind hissed through the narrow alleys of Greenvale like it carried secrets. Briggs wasn't sleeping. He hadn't in 2 nights. The silence from Keanu wasn't victory. It was a trap, and he could feel it, like a wire pulled tight, waiting to snap. Inside the blood dog's hideout, tension simmered. The club used to be rowdy. Laughter, music, boots slamming against tables. Now, it was whispers. Eyes darting to corners, arguments in low voices. Thorne had tightened the leash, but Briggs had already chewed through it. He's not just a guy with a dog, Briggs muttered to himself in the back room, staring at a whiteboard covered in half-baked plans and red X's. He's connected. He didn't know who the men in the black SUV were, but he knew they weren't local. That meant reach. That meant Keanu had people. Off-the-grid people. And that shifted everything. Briggs slammed his fist into the wall. He was losing control. And control was the only thing he ever had. Keanu stood in the shadows behind a one-way mirror in an office above the old firehouse. Inside the main floor, Gabe and his team ran surveillance recon like a tactical command center. Dossiers on each Blood Dog member lined the corkboard. Photos, aliases, arrest records, known associates. A printed map of Greenvale had red pins jammed into hotspots. The clubhouse, Torca's den, Iron Fang bar, and the back alley where Shadow had nearly been burned alive. Briggs is cracking, Gabe said, approaching him with a tablet in hand. He's sloppy, talking louder, planning alone. That makes him the weak point. Keanu nodded slowly. He's the match. But we need the fire. Gabe swiped through. Images. Briggs at a gas station at the clubhouse arguing with a man outside a pawn shop. He's doing drop work, ferrying packages for a mid-level supplier. We believe that supplier is using the biker gang as a shell to push product across county lines. Keanu studied the photos in silence. I need to get him to talk, Keanu finally said. Not just about the dog. About everything. You're not trained to extract confessions, Gabe reminded him. I'm not looking for a confession, Keanu said. I'm looking for a mistake. Mel's phone buzzed at 11:07 a.m. the next day. She didn't hesitate. She called the number Keanu gave her. They're back, she said quietly. 4 of them, including the one that kicked your dog. They're watching people again, intimidating the new dishwasher. Keanu was already on his way. Inside the café, Briggs leaned across the counter, lips twisted in a smug smile. What's the soup today? He sneered. Hope it's not full of fear. Mel didn't look up. She focused on cleaning a glass, but her hands trembled. Behind them, the bell over the door jingled. Footsteps. Briggs turned. Keanu stood there, dressed in a faded jacket and black jeans, sunglasses tucked into his shirt collar. Didn't expect to see you here again, Briggs said. Keanu's expression didn't change. That's the thing about bullies, they always expect silence. Briggs chuckled, but it was forced. You came here alone? No, Keanu said softly. At that moment, Gabe stepped through the back door, flanked by 2 men who looked more like shadows than bodyguards. One stayed by the entrance. The other locked the cafe door and flipped the sign to closed. Mel and the rest of the staff quietly slipped into the kitchen. Briggs's bravado faltered. You gonna make a scene? Pretty boy? He asked, reaching for something in his vest. No, Keanu replied. I'm going to let you talk. Briggs laughed. Talk? You think I'll tell you anything? You already are, Keanu said. You're sweating. You're twitching. Your mouth runs before your brain thinks. Gabe stepped forward. We know who your supplier is. We know what's in the crates. You move. We know where you keep your burn phones. Briggs blinked. You're bluffing, he said. Gabe slid a folder onto the table. Inside were photos, timestamps, audio transcripts. Briggs opened it and froze. You're done, Gabe said. We're not here to bargain. We're here to let you pick the kind of ending you want. Briggs's breathing picked up. His hands curled into fists. I didn't poison the dog, he blurted out. I only kicked it. That's all I did. Keanu didn't blink. So someone else went further? Briggs swallowed. He wanted to send a message, he said, voice suddenly quieter. Not me, I just wanted to scare you, but Thorne? He said the dog was leverage, that hurting it would shake you. And did it? Keanu asked. Briggs hesitated. Yeah, he said, but not the way we expected. Gabe turned the confession over to local law enforcement. Within the hour, the Greenvale PD quietly raided the Blood Dogs clubhouse. No sirens, no headlines, just flashlights and hard knocks on back doors. The charges ranged from conspiracy to animal cruelty, drug trafficking to aggravated assault. Thorne went down last, handcuffed with a glare frozen on his face, watching his empire unravel in real time. Keanu watched from the other side of the street, arms folded, Shadow sitting beside him. You did good, Gabe said. I didn't do it for that, Keanu replied. I did it so people like Mel don't have to flinch anymore. So that next dog doesn't get hurt. So the next kid walking past that bar doesn't get dragged into something they don't understand. Gabe nodded. Still, you did good. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded note, the same one that had been stabbed into his door. He unfolded it, then lit a match. The flames licked at the paper, turning it black, curling the words into ash. As it disintegrated in his fingers, Keanu let the smoke rise. Shadow pressed against his leg, warm and solid and alive. The quiet in Greenvale after the raid was unnatural. It wasn't peace. It was the breath between punches, the moment when everyone's still standing but waiting for the next blow. The blood dogs were fractured. Thorne was behind bars, awaiting federal transfer. Several members had flipped under pressure, trading information for leniency, but one name wasn't on any arrest record: Mason Knox Delray. Briggs never mentioned him. Nobody did. But Gabe found the thread, buried in encrypted burner texts and partial witness statements. Knox wasn't just another biker. He was the one who poisoned Shadow, the one who slipped a spiked sausage into the dog's bowl while Keanu was in the cafe bathroom, the one who disappeared right after. A ghost. Until... Now, Knox is real, Gabe said, dropping a manila folder onto the table. He and Keanu were back at Windmark, 3 floors below ground level. Concrete walls, radio silence, the kind of place where names became liabilities. Keanu flipped the folder, open mugshots from 8 years ago, military discharge papers, a sealed court file with a scratched-out DOJ watermark. He used to run black bag ops for private contractors, Gabe explained. Vanished after a friendly fire incident in Syria. Re-emerged 2 years ago in Bakersfield. Since then, 3 overdose deaths tied to bad batches. No witnesses, no charges. Keanu studied the photo. Shaved head, scar across his jaw, gray-blue, eyes with no reflection. That's the man who hurt Shadow, Keanu said. Yeah, Gabe nodded. And he's not hiding anymore. He slid over a GPS tablet. Last ping was in Clearage, 50 miles east. Abandoned feed warehouse on Holler Street. Surveillance went dark 36 hours ago. Keanu's voice was calm. Then we turned the lights back on. Clearage wasn't a town. It was a memory of one. Rusting silos, boarded windows, empty lots overtaken by weeds and forgotten cars. It felt like the kind of place people didn't visit. They escaped it, or were swallowed by it. Keanu rolled up in a beat-up pickup, unmarked, no tags. Just him and Shadow. Gabe and 2 others were posted on rooftops nearby, maintaining a silent perimeter. The warehouse on Holler Street looked dead, but the trail wasn't cold. Fresh tracks in the dirt, ash in the barrel outside, a cigarette still, smoldering. He parked 100 yards away and walked the rest of the path on foot. No rush, no sound. Shadow walked beside him, leash loose. As they neared the loading bay, Keanu paused. He could hear it, movement inside. Then, voices. Can't believe. Thorne's in lockup, a gruff voice said inside. All because Briggs couldn't keep his damn foot to himself, another voice replied. Deeper, slower. Doesn't matter. I told him that dog was leverage. He didn't listen. Keanu stepped through the doorway. Funny thing about leverage, he said, voice echoing through the vast metal cavern. You only hold it if you know when to let go. 3 men turned. 2 younger guys grabbed for weapons. But Keanu wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Knox. Face to face now. 8 years, older than the last photo. But the same dead eyes. Knox smirked. Didn't expect you to show. Keanu didn't blink. You poisoned a dog. I warned you. Knox replied, walking slowly toward him. Should have stayed out of it. But no. You got your muscle, your cameras, your big name. Keanu's voice dropped. That dog trusted people again because of me, and you tried to take that from him. Knox shrugged. Wasn't personal. To him it was, Keanu replied. To me, it still is. The 2 younger men lunged. Keanu moved first, a feint, a redirect. The first man's arm slammed into a beam, dropping his weapon. Shadow barked once, low and sharp, before locking eyes on the second attacker and lunging, pulling Keanu clear as the man swung a pipe. It all happened in seconds. Knox grabbed a crowbar swinging wide. Keanu dodged. The crowbar whistled past. Keanu stepped in, 1 strike to the ribs, another to the jaw. Knox stumbled but didn't fall. You think this ends with you? Knox spat. No, Keanu said. It ends with the truth. Knox roared, charging again. But this time, Keanu wasn't there to fight. He was buying time. Behind them, Gabe and his team burst through the side door. Weapons drawn. Commands barked. Knox dropped the crowbar too late. Cuffed, secured, finished. Back in Greenvale, the news broke quietly. No press releases, no red carpet headlines, just clean arrests, sealed files, and quiet protection for those who needed it most. Mel, her staff, the cafe's owner, and others who had lived in silence for too long. Keanu didn't ask for credit. He didn't want it. He just wanted Shadow safe. That night, Keanu sat on the back porch of the rental. Shadow lay beside him, snoring lightly. The air smelled like sage and wet dirt. Gabe stood nearby, hands in his coat pockets. "You could have walked away," he said. 100 times. "I don't walk away from loyalty," Keanu replied. "Not when someone proves they'd take pain to protect you." He looked down at Shadow. "I owed him more than a scene." Gabe nodded. "Well, there's one more thing." He pulled a folded envelope from his jacket and handed it to Keanu. "What is it?" Keanu asked. "Confirmation," Gabe said, "that the man who hurt your dog won't ever get out. There's too much evidence, and he confessed. On body cam. Said you'd never track him down, said you weren't real." Keanu opened the envelope. Inside was a single photo. Knox behind bars. No sneer, no smirk, just emptiness. Keanu set it on the table beside him. "I'm real enough," he said quietly. Shadow stirred, pressed his head against Keanu's knee, and let out a soft sigh. The morning after the final takedown, the first light broke gently over Greenvale. The sky was washed in soft pastels, pale, orange fading into blue. It was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't feel like tension but resolution. A calm earned. Keanu Reeves stood by the open gate of the local park. The same park where this whole thing had begun, where Shadow had been kicked, where silence had once been mistaken for weakness. Not today. Shadow, tail wagging, stepped into the grass, limping slightly less than before. His ribs were still tender, but his spirit hadn't dulled. If anything, the fire behind his eyes had grown, tempered by survival, strengthened by trust. Keanu walked beside him, leash in hand. Same as before. But the weight of the leash wasn't responsibility anymore. It was connection, bond, wordless loyalty earned in fire. They passed a few familiar faces. Mel, now smiling freely, her apron clean, and her steps lighter. Officer Tiana from Greenvale. Petey nodded from her cruiser, offering a respectful wave. Even a few kids in backpacks stopped to pet Shadow, their laughter the truest sound the neighborhood had heard in weeks. No one mentioned the blood dogs. They didn't need to. They were gone, and, in their place, Greenvale was starting to breathe again. Later that day, Keanu visited the vet clinic one final time. Dr. Holman smiled the moment she saw Shadow trot in beside him. "He's walking better," she noted, kneeling to run gentle fingers along the dog's flank. Keanu nodded. "He's healing. Inside too," she added. She stood, meeting Keanu's eyes. "You did more for him than medicine ever could." Keanu glanced down at Shadow. "He did more for me too." Before leaving, Dr. Holman handed him a folder. "What's this?" he asked. "His discharge papers. Updated medical records. He's officially cleared," she said. "Also, his microchip info is updated." Keanu flipped the folder open. The line that caught his eye was simple. Owner, Keanu Reeves. He hadn't filled that part out until now. Before, Shadow was a companion for the set, a co-star, temporary. Now, he was family. That evening, back at the small rental house, Keanu sat on the porch with his boots resting on the railing, a quiet cup of tea cooling in his hand. Shadow lay curled beside him, head resting on Keanu's boot, one ear flicking lazily. With the breeze, from his phone a text pinged from Gabe, "Clean sweep. Charges holding. FBI's picking up the rest. Greenvale is clear." Another message followed seconds later. "You ready for what's next?" Keanu looked out over the street. What was next? The movie would resume next week. Shadow would appear. In one final scene, a moment meant to reflect trust between man and beast. It was never meant to be a defining moment in the script. But now, it was the heart of the film. And for Keanu, it wasn't acting anymore. He set the phone down, breathed in, felt the breeze, let it all go. 2 weeks later, a low-profile charity gala was held in Los Angeles. Keanu arrived without fanfare, dressed simply, no entourage. He declined interviews and bypassed the red carpet. He was there for one reason. The event, justice and kindness, a night for animal welfare. Halfway through the night, the host took the stage, clearing his throat before addressing the crowd. "Tonight," he began, We recognize not only the incredible work of our animal rescue partners, but also the courage of those who stand up for the voiceless, even when no cameras are watching. A pause. And this year's Guardian Award goes to someone who didn't just talk about love for animals. He acted on it, even when it could have cost him, for protecting a dog the world never saw, and reminding all of us that kindness has no off switch. We thank Mr. Keanu Reeves. Polite applause grew into a genuine standing ovation. Keanu walked to the stage quietly, accepting the modest crystal plaque. He said few words. "I didn't save a dog," he said softly. "I met someone who showed me what loyalty really means, and I just made sure the world didn't take that from him." The room went quiet. Some smiled. Others wiped away unexpected tears. It wasn't about celebrity. It was about connection. Back at home, Keanu placed the award on a shelf. Not in the front. Not with the movie trophies or signed scripts, but right above Shadow's bowl. Because that's who earned it. That night, as he curled onto the couch, Shadow leapt up beside him, tail wagging. No limp, no pain, just peace. Elsewhere, far from Greenvale, far from Hollywood, a man in a federal jumpsuit sat behind bulletproof glass. Knox. No longer free, no longer feared, just a man with nothing left but time. A guard entered, handing him a thick envelope. From the Justice Department, the guard said. Knox opened it. Inside were printed photos, surveillance images from the warehouse, transcripts from his own confession, signed court documents, but at the very bottom, a final photo. Shadow, healed, smiling beside Keanu. The note beneath it read, "You never understood what strength looks like. Now you have time to think about it." No signature. None needed. Knox crumpled the photo in his fists, but the image was burned in. The dog survived, and the man never blinked. Greenvale didn't turn into a fairy tale town overnight, but the fear was gone. The bikers were out. The bar was sold. The park, full again. And every once in a while, people would see a tall man in a black jacket walking a gray pit bull just before dusk. No drama, no entourage, just a quiet kind of presence. And for those who knew the story, it wasn't about a celebrity. It was about what you do when no one expects you to act. It was about loyalty, about courage, about what happens when you kick the wrong dog.